Not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen.
Oké, zo. Goedenavond allemaal. Goedenavond allemaal. Zo, hey, welkom vanavond bij Ventilator, of heet het Cinema Ventilator. Mijn naam is Khadija Mourabit en ik ben heel erg blij om u allen te zien. We zijn ietsje later begonnen dan we van plan waren. We wilden echt precies om 6:30 beginnen, maar het is niet erg. We lopen een klein beetje uit. Ik hoop dat het goed gaat met jullie. Hoe is het met jullie allemaal? Oké, ja. Nou, de omstandigheden natuurlijk, hè. Ik bedoel, er gebeurt heel veel. Maar ik ben heel blij om hier te zijn. En welkom nogmaals bij deze avond over Frans Fanon. Ik ga een inleiding, een introductie geven over zijn boek The Wretched of the Earth. Maar dat weten jullie natuurlijk wel, anders dan zaten jullie hier niet. En daarnaast combineer ik het met stukjes film uit The Battle of Algiers. Kent iemand deze film? Ik zag gewoon een paar mensen ja knikken. Ja, 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 ik ken hem ook. Oké. Nou, als je het niet kent, is niet erg. Want je gaat vanavond een aantal korte fragmenten zien en de film is ook te bekijken. But I was talking in Dutch and this evening is in English. So welcome everybody. I'm going to do that all over again in English. My default mode is Dutch, as you can see. So I would like to welcome to this evening about Frans Fanon and his Wretched of the Earth in combination with a movie called The Battle of Algiers. We're going to see snippets of that. My name is Khadija Mourabit and I'm going to host this evening. But first of all, I would like to thank Ventilator Cinema for hosting us and also Ibrahim and Jake who are making this evening possible. And there will also be delicious food, Palestinian food, that Nihal will be selling. And all donations of this evening are going to Medical Aid Palestine. So, yes. Yes, a round of applause also for Ibrahim and Jake and for yourself for being here. So, normally, I am used to a table, so I have to do this very creatively. But today we will be discussing the influential work of The Wretched of the Earth, or as it is called in Dutch, De Verworpenen der Aarde, by Frans Fanon. Fanon was a French intellectual who was born in Martinique, and he was also a very prominent thinker and psychiatrist, who devoted his life to understanding the psychological and social consequences of colonialism, but also of decolonization. This applies to the colonizer as well as the colonized. And regarding to that is why what Fanon did with The Wretched of the Earth, very interesting, because he was one of the first to analyze what the effects of colonialism is on the colonized and the colonizer. But before I go on, I forgot to introduce myself. I am a philosopher. I studied philosophy at the University of Amsterdam. I also am a lecturer. I lecture teachers regarding to anti-racism and anti-discrimination. I've done a lot of other stuff, as you can see here behind me. But this evening is not about me, it's about Frans Fanon and The Wretched of the Earth. Yeah, so The Wretched of the Earth is a book that explores the experiences of the colonized with a focus on the psychological consequences of the colonial regime. It was published in 1961, a period when many former colonies were gaining independence from colonial rule. Fanon's work was of great significance to the liberation movements and revolutionary thinkers worldwide. An important aspect of Fanon's book is his emphasis on the dehumanizing nature of colonialism and the importance of violent resistance as a means for the oppressed to reclaim their humanity. He analyzes how colonialism brings not only political but also economic oppression, but also deep psychological traumas to the colonized population. He was born in Martinique in 1925. He was a philosopher, a psychiatrist, and a revolutionary who dedicated his life to understanding and combating the colonial domination. In his later years, he was actively involved in the Algerian independence struggle, which profoundly influenced his thinking and writing of the Wretched of the Earth, hence the Battle of Algiers. It was published in 1961, and it is the result of these very intense experiences, and it provides crucial insights into the psychological and social consequences of colonialism. But before I delve into the philosophical framework, I want to tell you when it is time for you to ask questions. That will be at the end. Unless you have a very, very deeply philosophical question, I will make an exception. But we can talk, have a dialogue at the end. I will try to show you certain things, because when you start to ask questions at the beginning, maybe the answer was coming along all the way. So if you would like to bear with me, then we can talk about everything you will hear at the end. So if you have any questions, keep it in mind or write it down, or don't put it on your phone because you will get distracted. And then at the end we can have a discussion about it, because I also have a question for you, the audience. So the philosophical framework. He begins his treatise with a powerful description of the shared experience of the colonized world, where humanity is reduced to a wretched being. That's also the link with the title of his book. And in doing so, he employs the theoretical construction of the meester, that was Dutch, of the master-slave dialectic by the philosopher George Hegel. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, I will explain it. According to Hegel, a human reality shapes itself into what we call a universal history. What was characterized this history is the unequal relationship between individuals. Some tyrannize, while others are tyrannized. Fanon argues that the colonial systems involves not only a political and economic oppression, but also a profound influence on the human consciousness and self-image. Here we touch upon one of the core themes of Fanon's work, the psychological impact of colonial domination on both the oppressor and the oppressed. In his view, in Fanon's view, the colonizer becomes not only the architect of the political structure, but also the mental structure of the colonized. Colonial domination justifies itself by maintaining a cultural and intellectual climate that emphasizes the superiority of the colonial regime. Fanon calls for a radical break from this mental captivity as necessary condition for true liberation. Thus, the Battle of Algiers. I will give you a cinematic parallel. And to make the philosophical depth of Fanon's work tangible, we will turn to the Battle of Algiers, the movie directed by Guillaume Pontecorvo in 1966. This film provides a gripping narrative of the Algerian struggle for independence. And it's intriguing how the visual representation of events parallel Fanon's ideas. I do have to give a disclaimer because there is violence and torture are depicted in the scenes in the movie. That is because the director, Pontecorvo, wanted to give an accurate account of the liberation struggle and the colonization of Algiers by the French during that time. We begin with the first scene. And it's a street as a theater of conflict. It's an impressive opening scene of the movie where the French paratroopers invade the streets of Algiers. There is tumult, there is chaos, and brutal violence displayed offer a direct visual representation of the military oppression that Fanon describes in his book. These images make us feel what it means to live under the yoke of colonial domination. In his book, Fanon discusses how the street often becomes a stage for political struggle where the colonized express their resistance. I have to get my clicker. Let's see. What will happen if I do this? I have to ask for the lights to go down a bit so we can watch the scene.
Nationale. Communiqué numéro 1. Peuple algérien. Notre action est dirigée contre le colonialisme. Le but est l'indépendance nationale avec la restauration de l'État algérien, dans le cadre des principes islamiques et le respect de toutes les libertés fondamentales, sans distinction de race ni de religion. Aux autorités françaises, pour limiter les pertes en vies humaines, nous proposons une honorable plateforme de discussion pour le droit à notre peuple de disposer de lui-même. Algérien, ton devoir est de sauver ton pays et de lui rendre la liberté. Sa victoire sera la tienne. En avant, frères, unissez-vous. Le Front de Libération Nationale vous appelle à la lutte.
approchez M. Dam, à vous jouer, à M. Dam, تقدموا. هذه ما تربحش وهذه ما تربحش، هذه ما تربحش. هذه تربح، هذه تربح، لاصق. هذه ما تربحش وهذه ما تربحش، دايم مع لاصق. على M. Dam, دايم مع لاصق. هذه ما تربحش وهذه ما تربحش.
Il est toujours là.
Il a prêté celui-là. Ali Lapointe, né le 15 janvier 1930 à Miliana, analphabète. Profession, manœuvre, maçon, boxeur, actuellement sans travail. Situation militaire, insoumis. 1942, tribunal pour mineurs d'Alger, 1 an de maison de redressement pour acte de vandalisme. 1944, tribunal pour mineurs d'Oran, 2 ans de maison de redressement pour cause de désordre public. 1949, tribunal d'Alger, condamnation à 8 mois de prison pour outrage à agent dans l'exercice de ses fonctions. شد فيه؟
بعت عندي وجوه واحد يضحك واحد يبكي.
تو اللي بعتو.
ايه انا اللي بعتوه. ها
احبس. هاي. هاي. تعرف تقرا.
نعم.
شد.
Un café mort dans la casse-pas. Le propriétaire s'appelle Mourabit. C'était l'indicateur de la police. Tous les jours, à 5 heures précises, à l'agent de police vient le voir. Il reste quelques minutes, le temps d'échanger quelques mots. Sous prétexte de boire une tasse de café, après quoi il sort. Tu dois tuer l'agent.
ماشي مغربي.
La police.
صح.
Tu ne peux pas te tromper. Tout près du café mort, il y aura une jeune fille avec.
Okay. Yeah, I will come back to Ali Lapointe. Yes, you want to see the rest. Let me see if I'm on the right track. Yeah, so this was the first one, this is the second, but this one. Okay, I have to find out if I'm on the right video. But this was Ali Lapointe, that's his guerrilla nickname. His actual name is Ali Ammar, and he's a very important figure in the French liberation resistance, the FLN, Front la Libération Nationale. I will come back to him, so remember Ali Lapointe. I have a second scene I want to show you, and it's about the guerrilla warfare, which was very important during the liberation struggle of the Algerian people. The resistance fighters, they planned their tactics, including the use of guerrilla warfare. This takes us to the heart of Fanon's analysis of the role of violence as a means for the colonized to assert their freedom and self-image. In the film, we see how the fighters develop strategies to resist a powerful enemy, reflecting the tactical considerations Fanon emphasizes in the pursuit of emancipation. And what is important to keep in mind when looking at these scenes from the Battle of Algiers is that there is very much a focus also on detail. Nothing in these clips or in the movie are by coincidence. There is a reason there was a focus right now on the eyes of the people that were imprisoned, because regarding to Fanon, there is this connection between what happens to the people that are being oppressed and colonized and how it changes them. And because it has changed them, they will enact upon certain things. And that is what you see why it is important that when you look at the movie and when you read about the Wretched of the Earth, what the meaning is between these different items. And don't think that violence is the end of all means, because Fanon also has a very cautious way of thinking about it, but that will come at the end. I will show you the second clip. Let me see if I have the right one. Just do this. Yeah.
Un café mort dans la casse-pas. Le propriétaire s'appelle Mourabit. C'était l'indicateur de la police.
I'm sorry I have to do this, but I see I don't have the right one. Yeah. This is it.
L'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies, après qu'aucune des motions présentées au cours du débat n'ait obtenu la majorité nécessaire,
a adopté une résolution qui exclut toute intervention directe de l'ONU dans la question algérienne. Elle se limite à exprimer l'espoir que dans un esprit de coopération soit trouvée une solution pacifique, démocratique et juste, conformément aux principes de la Charte des Nations Unies.
C'est du bon travail. Je les ai trouvés aux archives de la police. Les instantanés que j'ai fait en conduire. Mourad, Ramel, Jafar. Allez la prendre. Il faut en faire tirer 1 millier de copies et les distribuer à nos gars.
كانوا في 10 بقاو شويه وراحوا. ايه
على حسابك شكون جانا تشبيع ولا جا واحد؟
جاو وحدهم. اما لا هضروا مع الجيران وما ضربوا حتى حد.
لابد ان نتفاهموا ونقعدوا مع بعض. يمكننا كذلك نبدلوا نضاربوا ونتخبروا. قبل كل شيء لازم نبينوا باللي الجبهه مازال. لكن هذا الشيء يجي من بعد. لا في الحين يلزم نديروا عمليه. خلونا نديروا براسنا. لا لا انت لا حد منك. ونروح لك انت كيفاش؟ او كل شيء على بالك. Dans 3 mois, je me tire. Hé là, regarde. Hein? العسكر يجروا ورانا يا حمى ديك اختي، الا كاش خصنا بالخف يا حمى ديك.
سنا شوفوا نخبيوكم، حبوا تخبوا في السطح. جوزوا ربي يستركم ان شاء الله، ربي يستركم. تتخباو في البيت يا خالتي، ربي معاكم.
So, what Fanon also does is that he extensively explores the psychological effects of torture on both the perpetrators and the victims, because in dehumanizing others, one can also dehumanize him or herself or X. In the Battle of Algiers, scenes of torture are depicted. and they support Fanon's analysis of the dehumanizing nature of violence and its impact on the psyche of those involved, also meaning the colonizer and the colonized.
On parle beaucoup en ces derniers temps, non seulement des succès obtenus par les préjudices, mais aussi des méthodes qui seraient utilisées par eux. Pourriez-vous nous dire quelque chose à ce sujet?
Les succès dont vous parlez sont les résultats de ces méthodes. Les uns présupposent les autres et vice-versa.
Excusez-moi, mon colonel. Je pense qu'il vaudrait mieux appeler les choses par leur prénom. Et si on veut tout dire, parlons de la torture.
Essayons d'être précis. Le mot torture n'apparaît pas dans nos directives. Nous avons toujours parlé d'interrogatoire en tant que seule méthode valable pour une action de police contre une organisation clandestine. Le FLN, de son côté, demande à chacun de ses membres qu'en cas de capture, il conserve le silence pendant 24 heures, après quoi il peut partir. L'organisation a ainsi le temps nécessaire pour rendre inutilisable n'importe quel renseignement. Et nous, quelle forme d'interrogatoire devrions-nous adopter? Celui en usage dans la procédure civile qui, pour le moindre délit, dure des mois?
La légalité n'est pas toujours commode, mon colonel.
Est-ce que celui qui fait exploser des bombes dans les lieux publics respecte la légalité? Le problème est, le FLN veut nous chasser d'Algérie, mais nous voulons y rester. Nous avons même été envoyés ici pour cela. Et nous, messieurs, nous ne sommes ni fous, ni sadiques. Nous sommes des soldats. Et nous avons le devoir de vaincre. Alors, pour être précis, à mon tour maintenant de poser la question. La France doit-elle rester en Algérie? Si vous répondez encore oui, vous devez en accepter toutes les conséquences nécessaires.
So, as you can see, the use of torture is being rationalized by the colonizers. And you see that happening over and over again with different aspects of dehumanization, that it's being rationalized. And you see that also within the analysis of what Frans Fanon does is in his book, The Wretched of the Earth. The fourth and no less crucial scene is the emotional arrest of, remember from the beginning, Ali Lapointe, or as his birth name is, Ali Ammar, who is the leader of the National Liberation Front, FLN, of Algeria. Here, in the depth of human suffering and sacrifice, we can touch upon the psychological toll of the struggle for freedom. This scene, like many in the film, sheds light on the personal stories of individual sacrifices taking place amid the larger struggle for national liberation.
Ali Lapointe, je te donne encore 30 secondes. Qu'est-ce que tu penses de dire? De toutes les façons, tu as perdu. Réfléchis bien. 30 secondes. 30 secondes à partir de maintenant.
Легко хочешь.
Да что ты?
Он лишь помогает. Vous quatre, vous restez là. Et vous descendez au signal. Compris?
Colonel, commandant.
Alors, tout est en place?
Oui, tout est en place, mon général.
l'ennemi n'a plus de tête. Content, Mathieu?
Oui, mon général.
Le FLN est décapité à Alger.
Oui, je crois qu'on n'en parlera plus. Tout au moins, pendant quelque temps.
Pour toujours, espérons-le.
Ah, au fond, ce sont de braves gens. Nous nous sommes bien entendus avec eux pendant 130 ans. Je ne vois pas pourquoi ça ne continuerait pas.
Oui, mais il n'est pas seulement Alger en Algérie. Oui, je sais très bien qu'Alger n'est pas toute l'Algérie.
Oui, bien sûr. Mais pour le moment...
Okay. So as you can see, Ali Ammar, or Ali Lapointe, was blown up. And with that kind of violence within the framework of Fanon, what he says in the Wretched of the Earth, this has an impact on those that are being oppressed. This violence is not only being, they are not only treated violently, but this violence also changes the oppressed. And also the use of language. As you can see, in the scene, you hear that, I think he's a colonel or a general, he says, yeah, the head of the tapeworm is off. So the dehumanizing language in here is also very important. And that is also something that Frans Fanon talks about in his book. The next scene is about the importance, involvement, and role of women, which is very important because he emphasizes also the importance of women in the liberation struggle. The Battle of Algiers shows the active participation of women in the resistance, making it something that highlights Fanon's insight also on gender and liberation.
Pas le motif. On ne sait pas quel en aurait pu être le prétexte. Le fait est qu'après 2 années de calme relatif, pendant lesquelles la lutte a continué presque uniquement dans les montagnes, ils se sont déchaînés à l'improviste. Et personne ne sait ni pourquoi ni comment cela a éclaté. J'ai téléphoné à Tunis. À Tunis, j'ai parlé personnellement avec un dirigeant du FLN en exil. Eux non plus, ils n'en savent rien.
Pour la première fois sont apparus leurs drapeaux, vert et blanc avec le croissant et l'étoile. Des milliers de drapeaux. Ils ont dû les préparer pendant la nuit. Il est difficile de les appeler des drapeaux. Ce sont des lambeaux de drap, des chemises déchirées, des chiffons. Mais ce sont tout de même des drapeaux.
Malgré la pression des milieux colonialistes les plus intransigeants, il paraît que le gouvernement ait donné des ordres sévères de l'utiliser les armes qu'en dernière extrémité. Mais au cours de cet après-midi ont eu lieu les premières tentatives de descendre dans les quartiers européens. Et il y a eu de nombreux morts. Maintenant, le calme semble revenu.
Pas de doute que la surprenante unanimité de ces démonstrations a influencé de larges couches de l'opinion publique française. Selon les nouvelles de Paris, la partie la plus sensible des milieux politiques serait orientée vers la recherche de nouveaux rapports avec l'Algérie.
Écoutez-moi. Retournez chez vous. Qu'est-ce que vous voulez?
2 années de lutte devaient encore passer. Et le 2 juillet 1962, avec l'indépendance, naquit la nation algérienne.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's not the end. We still have some things. So as you can see, I did not depict only women. I depicted the end of the movie because you can see that women there are also very happy, but women throughout the movie, throughout the resistance against oppression and colonialism, play a very important role. And you can also see that in the movie. The thing is that Fanon also says that the way the gender aspect plays a role when you have oppression, when you have colonialism, is very important. Because, as you can see here, it says this woman who sees without being seen frustrates the colonizer. It was the colonialists' frenzy to unveil the Muslim woman in this battle. The occupier was bent on unveiling, because there is in it the will to bring this woman within his reach, to make her a possible object of possession. Fanon, 1959. Why is this important? Because the lived reality of women under oppression is also very important to name, because there also are ways of violence, like, for example, I have to say this word, so be warned, rape is also something that is used as a means of violence to oppress. And does anybody have you ever seen these pictures of women from the colonial era? Be it from Algeria, be it from Morocco, or any other colonized country? Let me look at you. I see yes. Okay. So I'm a bit blinded by the light, but if I do this, I can see you. So these women, normally, they do not walk around like this. These are women that were, I have the Dutch word, that were gedwongen. They were forced to take a picture like this, not being veiled. Because as you see in the movie, the women on the street normally wear this very big white cloth. And it's due to either religious reasons or it's very warm, scorching sun, etc. These are pictures of women that are fairly clothed. There are other pictures where the women had to be naked. And you see them with either their bare chest that is naked, or fully. And that also plays into the role of Orientalism, as Edward Said has taught us, that these women were like the 1001 Night, the promiscuous, exotic, etc., etc. This is also a very problematic prejudice idea that is also from this colonial era, in one way, because there's more to it. So it's very important to talk about this. If you want to know a bit more, there is this book. I don't have any, any stocks or anything. It's called The Colonial Harem by Malik Alula, and it is to give the women their agency back, because their agency was taken away from them and they were forced and they were oppressed. And this also still plays a role in France today, with the whole idea of veiled women being a thing of very focused on the veil in France. There is a very large history, and you can also read that like Fanon also delves into that. And when you read that and you look at society today and you see what is happening, you can see that there are certain parallels. Yeah? Okay, what do I have? Yeah. So, okay. Let me return back to Fanon's central theme. I don't have any movie snippets for you, so I'm just gonna tell you what I written down. So the central theme, the psychological effects of colonial domination in The Wretched of the Earth, he thoroughly analyzes the complexity of individual and collective traumas that arise in the context of oppression. Fanon discusses the uprooting of the colonized, the loss of their own identity and culture under the shadow of colonial power. And in the example of women, the gender aspect, there are other issues at hand. In the film, this psychological toll is impressively embodied by the characters Ali Lapointe or Ali Ammar, who was captured and confronted with the inhumanity of French prisons. You see that when they actually behead one of the prisoners, and then you have the other prisoners in their cell have this small window to the courtyard or the main area. This is not by accident. This is on purpose, because it's also what Fanon talks about in The Wretched of the Earth is not only physical violence, but also the psychological violence. So, the inhumanity of the French prisons symbolize thousands of others undergoing similar trials. Through his imprisonment, Ali Ammar, or Ali Lapointe, is changed on a fundamental level, and he is recruited into the FLN, the Algerian Liberation Movement. His personal struggle reflects the broader psychological impact that Fanon describes in his work. Then you have the role of violence, and a lot of people, when they read Frans Fanon, they misinterpret how Fanon explains violence. And it is very, very important when reading any book of Fanon that you read between the lines. Because before he wrote The Wretched of the Earth, he wrote Black Skin, White Masks. In Black Skin, White Masks, he does not write about violence as he does in The Wretched of the Earth. This is because in The Wretched of the Earth, he takes the colonial context and he analyzes what happens within a colonial context where oppression is taking place and how violence plays a role. So, another crucial aspect of Fanon's thinking, closely aligned with the events in the Battle of Algiers, is the role of violence in the struggle for liberation. Fanon does not understand violence solely as a physical act, but as a psychological instrument that emancipates the colonized from their deeply rooted feelings of inferiority. In the film, we see this vision come to life as the resistant fighters employ guerrilla tactics against French domination. Pontecorvo does not shy away from depicting this very harsh reality of war. And in these images, we are confronted with the duality of violence as a destructive force and as an instrument of liberation. The planning of bombings, the explosion in the street of Algiers, all of this illustrates the complexity of using violence in a struggle for independence. It takes us directly to the core of Fanon's belief that decolonization is a violent process to break the mental chains forged by centuries of domination. Remember this? I will come back to this at the end. Then we have the individual and the collective struggle. The unique aspect of Fanon's work is his ability to connect individual psychological experience with the broader collective struggle. He acknowledges that each colonized person is an individual with their own pain, traumas, and hopes. Yet Fanon also emphasizes the importance of these individuals coming together to form a powerful form of resistance. In the Battle of Algiers, we see this duality in a very remarkable way. The film not only follows the leaders of the FLN, the liberation movement, but also zooms in on ordinary people, men, women, and children, who form the backbone of the struggle. By depicting their daily lives, the emergent revolution, the film vividly portrays the strength of the collective. As we explore these intertwining of political concepts and cinematic representation, it is important to acknowledge that the Battle of Algiers is not merely an illustration of Fanon's ideas. It is rather an artwork engaging in a critical dialogue with the themes and questions presented in The Wretched of the Earth. It is essential to remember that the film is also presented from a Western perspective. And the influence of propaganda from that era, from that time, also plays a role in the narrative. How colonial subjects are portrayed requires careful scrutiny, as forms of Orientalism, racism, distrust toward the colonized, and more may be present in the film. Fanon himself was very cautious when it came to the representation of decolonization in art, fearing simplification and distortion. Nevertheless, this film, in all its complexity, provides an accessible entry into the world of Fanon, and it also offers us the opportunity to not only read his ideas, but also see and feel them. Let me get this. Okay. So what is the contemporary relevance? Now, as we delve into these profound reflections on decolonization, it is also relevant to bridge the gap to the present. Fanon's work, although rooted in the context of the decolonization of African countries, continues to provide a relevant lens through which we can understand contemporary global power structures. In our world, there are still conflicting voices calling for liberation and justice. The legacy of colonialism remains in the structures of power, economic inequality, and deeply ingrained prejudice. Fanon's work invites us not only to look at the past, but also to the present, with a critical eye on the mechanisms of oppression that are still active. As we delve deeper into The Wretched of the Earth and the Battle of Algiers, let us not forget that this intellectual journey does not end by the closing of a book or dimming the lights after a film. Fanon invites us to place his words into our own context, to contemplate how we, as individuals and as a society, can contribute to the ongoing struggle for justice and liberation. As we explore the depths of decolonization and the psychological consequences of oppression today, let us become aware that the power of ideas and images to bring about change. Fanon, with his sharp insights and passion for liberation, remains a guide on this journey, a voice that reminds us of the possibility of a world free from the chains of the colonial legacy. Now, concerning what is happening in Gaza or Gaza, Fanon says, I quote, "Decolonization is the veritable creation of new men. But this creation owes nothing of its legitimacy to any supernatural power. The thing which has been colonized becomes man during the same process by which it frees itself." This quote reflects Fanon's thoughts on decolonization and the transformative process for those who have been colonized. Let's discuss the key points of the quote. In essence, Fanon's quote encapsulates his belief that true decolonization is a holistic process that involves not only political independence, but also the profound redefinition of and liberation of the individual and the society. It challenges the dehumanizing effects of colonization, and it asserts that the legitimacy of this transformation is intrinsic to the act of decolonization itself. He further states, "Decolonization is the meeting of two forces, opposed to each other by their very nature. Their first encounter was marked by violence and their existence together. That is to say, the exploitation of the native by the settler was carried on by dint of a great array of bayonets and cannons. In other words, colonial rule is maintained through violence and oppression." Fanon strongly emphasizes that colonial rule is the purveyor of violence in the house and in the mind of the native population. Fanon even posits that violence is the natural state of colonial rule. This violence arises from the racialized views that the colonizer holds about the colonized subjects. The colonizer often attributes ideas of backwardness and the lack of empathy and rationality to the colonized. The colonial subject is thus so dehumanized by colonialism that it changes him into an animal. As Fanon says, "It then becomes natural for the colonizer to employ violence in the colonial context, because the dehumanized colonial subject will not respond to anything else according to the colonizer. For the colonial subject, freeing itself from colonialism through violence can be a cathartic experience." Collective catharsis is described as, "In every society, in every collective, there must exist a channel, an outlet through which the forces accumulated in the form of aggression can be released." Aristotle, the philosopher, Greek philosopher, used this term to describe a situation in which feelings of pity and fear are aroused and then relieved by an intervening event. For Fanon, this term is inseparably connected to the experience of the colonized subject. Liberating itself from colonial rule through violent means, the violence is the intervening event capable of removing their feelings of self-loathing, internalized after constant repetition by colonial power. The colonial subject is also able to restore their self-respect and regain control over their political life. This violence is cathartic for the Algerians in the sense that it allows them to restore the sense of self that has been destroyed by their colonial oppressors. Fanon says, and I quote, "Thus the native discovers that his life, his breath, his beating heart are the same as those of the settler. He finds out that the settler's skin is not of any more value than the native skin. And it must be said that this discovery shakes the world in a very necessary manner. For if, in fact, my life is worth as much as the settler's, his glance no longer shrivels me or freezes me up, and his voice no longer turns me into stone." Fanon also argues that violence has the potential to provide healing for some of the mental illnesses of the colonized subjects. Despite recognizing the potential in violence, Fanon does not believe that violence should be used lightly or as an end to itself. Fanon also documents the dangerous and negative effects of violence. The initial and most apparent negative aspect of violence is the physical harm it inflicts on people. Throughout Fanon's work, the physical and human toll of violence is clearly emphasized. Furthermore, it is crucial to read between the lines of Fanon's writing. He does not advocate for violence, but sharply analyzes the condition of the colonized subject that is influenced and reduced to violence by context of colonialism. Colonialism, as Fanon says, is inherently violent, and violence begets violence. So I have a question for you. Considering the situation in Gaza and everything that happened for 75 years, but especially we focus on the 7th of October, how do these events fit within the ideology of Frans Fanon, his Wretched of the Earth, and his theory on violence in relation to colonialism? Thank you. Sorry, what did you say? We need a microphone, or shall I walk around with the microphone? So let me see how late. So with that said, I end my part of giving you insights about Frans Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. And I would like to, thank you very much, to invite you to a dialogue about it. I'm going to walk towards you. What did you just say when I asked the question?
Viva la resistencia.
Ah, thank you. Long live the revolution. So, any questions that you have? This light is very bright. Or anything that you want to share? Any ideas? I see someone at the back. I don't know if there is a microphone.
I have a soft voice, but I think everyone can hear me. So I actually have two questions. So one of the first questions is about what kind of parallels do you see between, for example, the FLN and Hamas? What are the parallels?
If there are parallels.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and do you also see differences between them?
Yes.
Things like, oh, they're very different in these kind of ways.
Okay.
And also, in academia, a lot of people were very into decolonization. Frans Fanon was really popular. But what do you think of the silence of a lot of academics?
Mm-hmm.
How they just...
Okay. Okay, so the first question is, are there any parallels or differences regarding to Hamas and the FLN? And the second one is, what do I think about academia always writing about decolonization, but now we are literally in it, and there are certain reactions. So regarding to the first question, I will answer what I think, as a philosopher, that Frans Fanon would have said regarding to the Wretched of the Earth. And I am not sure, because he's not alive anymore, unfortunately, but I think that if you take the ideology of Frans Fanon and the way he sees that you have to have resistance against oppression and colonialism, if we see that the UK has designated the Palestinian hoe zeg je dat, gebieden, spaces, territories, as an occupied territory. This is the official stance. And we could say that then the Palestinians are the oppressed, and that they are being oppressed by oppressors, meaning the Israeli state. Then Fanon would say that this is a case just like what happened in Algeria, that there is oppression, there is an oppressor, and there are the oppressed. And thus, it means that it may as well be that Fanon would say that Hamas is a liberation movement.
But Hamas is a liberation movement.
Yes, yes, but we're talking within the context of Fanon, yeah? Because he's not alive, I can't ask him anymore. But when I look at what he has written and his ideology, this is how he would designate it. Yeah? Regarding to academia, I don't know if you heard about there was this event that was organized at the VU about teach-in, about what is happening in Gaza, and they did not want it to happen. Eventually, the people who were organizing this event could go to another place where they held the event, which was very successful because a lot of people came also to the event. I think there is a disconnect between academia writing about decolonization in theory and when it's a lived reality, when it is happening, there is a big disconnect there. But I also think there is also this situation where a long time there was this idea of what was happening in Palestine, and I think due to recent events you can see that many more people have started to look at it differently, and that also is very important, and I think that big institutions are lagging behind regarding to that. Yeah, I see a hand there. You are first, then you, and then I will get to you. I have to get a little bit. Yeah, but I can't hear you very well when I'm there, so I'm just standing here.
I'm not sure if I feel, on both things, the second thing I find it a bit generalizing. Academia, what is academia? I think that who is calling for decolonization, I think it's mostly the same voices calling for decolonization, who are also there's probably a big overlap between people calling for decolonization and people calling out against Hamas, but about the first point, however, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with the quick parallel between FLN and Hamas. I have to admit that I don't know enough about Hamas, but I think in order to make parallels like this, I think then it's important to be precise and to analyze. But I feel this is to call Hamas a liberation movement. I don't know. From what I know, I feel that's too quick.
Yeah. Have you read Fanon?
I have read. That's why is that relevant now?
Yeah.
Because it's a topic.
Because if you look at it from the perspective and the writings of Fanon and his ideology, he would see that Israel is the colonizer because it is linked to settler colonialism, and the Palestinian people, they are the colonized. When you look at it from that context, then when you know what he says about violence being a way of freeing oneself of settler colonialism, then there is a very big chance that Fanon would say that Hamas is a liberation movement. What I think about it personally, I'm just leaving it out there. I'm just talking from the perspective of Fanon. So I get that you feel uncomfortable about it, but when reading Fanon, this is the analysis that you can make. You cannot turn it around, you know, because this is not the way Fanon writes about oppression and oppressed and colonization and decolonization, freedom movements in the Wretched of the Earth.
Yeah, I find it probably more than uncomfortable. I find it a bit problematic even, and not so much because of the statement, but because we haven't been talking about Hamas. And it's like, then we need more analysis to make that parallel, but to just bluntly say, this is equal to that, I think it's problematic. I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem. You can find it problematic. You are entitled to your opinion. But we are here this evening talking about Fanon. And when you look at it from that context, you can't deny that, that's the analysis that we can make. And you can still find it problematic.
Yeah, but you have not made an analysis. I'm sorry. I mean, because then explain what is the parallel between FLN and Hamas? Because now it's dropped at the end.
I told you that in the context of the oppressed and settler colonialism, you have liberation movements of the native people, and you have oppressors that are the settler colonialists. When you look at Algeria, the French were the settler colonialists, and the Algerian people were the natives. If you take that context and you look at what is happening in Palestine and you look at Gaza, would you then, from you finding it problematic, which you have a right to find it problematic, would you say that the occupying force, which has been designated as an occupying force by the UK, would you call them the freedom fighters? And why?
So I don't want to take up too much more space, but the question I would have is, to what extent is Hamas a people's movement? So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm all for a ceasefire, and this is horrible what's happening there, so it's not about that, it's more about the quick parallel. I mean, it's like, and I have to say, I don't know enough about Hamas, but then in order to...
That wasn't her question, though.
Sorry?
That wasn't her question.
Yeah, okay, but now, I'm sorry, I also feel a bit uncomfortable, I don't know, I feel a bit...
No, but she's answering your question. Answer her question.
What's the question?
Not listening to your question?
I think it's a good, thank you. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, it's clear. I think it's a good idea. No, nobody's attacking you. We're just having a dialogue. Yeah? No, it's okay. But you should accept him also saying something to you, and I accept you saying something to me. No, but maybe you should read into some things before getting to conclusions. Maybe read The Wretched of the Earth, find out what Hamas has in their statement, and then you can see when the FLN had their liberation movement, what they were saying, then you can compare. Because now there is not enough information to have this conversation.
Yeah, but not in your talk, it's like I don't know, I'll stop now because I don't want to take up more space.
No, it's okay. It's okay to take up space. Everybody's allowed to take up space here. We are in a brave space. But I will just leave it at this because I want to go to the other question askers, so everybody gets a chance to ask a question and the focus will not be solely on you. Yeah? Okay. So who was the next one? I had a hand over there, and then I come back to you, and then I saw you raising a hand, and you're the next one. Okay. I'll just go here. Yes. Who was the person? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something, but...
Yeah. You can ask me anything except my bank PIN.
Maybe. I was also wondering if Fanon mentioned something about how being oppressed...
Sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. No,
okay. You want the microphone? Okay. Yeah. So if Fanon mentions of something like being oppressed, and then?
Yeah, and the relationship between being oppressed and having no opportunities for education to grow, and how that also affects or forces people into violence.
Yes. He definitely says something about that. He says that the oppressed are being robbed of opportunities. And when you watch, there is this documentary called Concerning Violence, which is based on The Wretched of the Earth. You will see different scenes from different countries that were being colonized in the 60s and 70s, where you have one person, I forgot from which country, literally says that they were not in the, they didn't have the possibility to go to school, knowledge is important, being educated is important. And then they link it to this part from The Wretched of the Earth that is being, what's her name, the singer from the Fugees, she's narrating it. So he definitely talks about a lack of opportunities because you are being oppressed. And regarding to violence, he also literally says that colonization is inherently violent and that it brings violence into the mental state and into the homes of the oppressed. Because the oppressed did not start out as violent. They have been, they became violent because of this colonial and oppressive context that they are in. Yes? Okay. So you were the next one. I will come back. Well, no, because it was one. You were first? Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Here you go.
Thank you. But now that you say like you were first, like it flew away. It flew away. I'll come back after.
I will come back to you. Just call me. Yeah, when you remember, not at 3 o'clock in the night when you're lying in bed, you're like, ah, she has my number, I know, because don't give her my number, okay? Hi. You want the microphone? I'll give it to you, yeah? Well, thank you. Sorry for the thing, yeah.
Ik ga het gewoon in Nederlands doen.
Ja, I will translate. Ja, vertaal.
Even sneller willen zijn dan... Ik voel mij hier betrokken bij. Mijn moeder is Marokkaans, mijn vader Algerijns. Ik ben geboren in Marokko.
Mm-hmm.
Dus voor mij, dit raakt dit is niet een verhaal, het raakt diep. Ik maak even een switch naar Hannah Jones. Bekend bij jullie, project 1619.
Een beetje dichterbij, ja.
Zo,
hoe heet ze?
Hannah Jones.
Hannah Jones.
Bekende, Verenigde Staten, heeft in 20 een boek uitgegeven van 1619,
Mm-hmm.
waarin zij het heeft over slaafgemaakte westerse slavernijhandel, kolonialisme. En ze heeft ook gezegd van wat het voor een diep effect heeft tot op de beleidsmakers, de huidige situatie, beslissingen die gemaakt worden, het ontmenselijken van een deel van de samenleving enzovoort. Dus ik leg even een link met Fanon. Waar het om gaat is het gemak. Is vooral het gemak waarin de ene mens van meer waarde is dan de andere. Het gemak waarom de ene vermoord mag worden, ontmenselijk mag worden, alles afgenomen worden. Ik denk ook aan de vluchtelingen die gewoon ergens levensgevaarlijke tocht maken en over het gaat maar door. Dus waarom? Dus dit soort verleden, dit stuk verleden, sorry mijn verhaal is een beetje lang. Dit stuk verleden heeft tot op de dag van nu effect op hoe wij naar de mensen kijken. De verschillen die wij maken. En dat is zorgwekkend. Dat is de nalatenschap. Dus daar gaat het mij om. Het kan nu in Gaza gebeuren, maar het kan ook zomaar ineens in een ander land gebeuren. En het gemak waarin dit gebeurt. Dit is wat mij constant raakt.
Ja.
Goed, het is geen vraag.
Nee, maar het is goed. Het is een bijdrage.
Ik denk dat wij hier moeten we het over gaan maken.
Mm-hmm.
Gaan hebben.
Ja.
Het gaat niet om wie gelijk heeft. Ik heb niets. Ik ben hier niet om gelijk te hebben.
Ja.
Wie gelijk heeft en wie ongelijk heeft. Wat goed en fout is. Het is hoe wij gebrainwashed zijn om naar ons mens zijn te kijken. Überhaupt.
Ja, dankjewel. So, I will translate. I will try to translate and I will give you, let's see. Thank you very much for that contribution. She said, I am half Moroccan and I'm half Algerian. And this touches upon more than just theory. Because, you know, it links with your identity, identifications, your history, your socio-history. And what is important is not who's wrong or right. What is important is that you read, what's her name, Jones, who wrote about, Anna Jones, who wrote about the slavery, transatlantic slavery. and that this way of dehumanizing others, I know you didn't say it literally like this, but I'm just trying to, yeah, and this idea of supremacy, of one, how you can say it, one over the other, that has been ingrained in our way of thinking, and that we have to get rid of that, because that's what is happening in Gaza, thinking that one group of people is superior to the other, that can happen anywhere, and it is happening anywhere, actually. So we need to focus on that. And I think also with Wretched of the Earth and Frans Fanon, he talks about dehumanization, you know, the way the language is being used, the way that the oppressed, the natives, are being, that they are not, that they are lowered to being lesser beings, not fully human, not rational, not having empathy, etc. He writes about this in The Wretched of the Earth. So very good point, thank you. So that was my translation, and then you had a question, and I will come back to you. Don't forget. Here you go.
Hi, thanks. Maybe you're going to spoil me the book, I haven't read it entirely. But I was wondering, what does Fanon say about organizations like the UN? Like in the example of like Battle of Algiers, they say like they can't do anything, and now this is the same thing.
Yeah.
So what would be his opinions possibly on the past and possibly current?
Yeah, that's a good question, which I have to think about, because I am inclined to say the following, that they are Western institutions, and that Western institutions with Western law, Western ideas, that they can only be, like a native or an oppressed can be part of it if they assimilate. But they, the natives or the oppressed, will never be on the same level as the colonizers. So the UN, to be honest, I cannot give you a very clear question, because I can't grasp literally what he means. I have to look that up and try to find out. But I would say what he writes about Western ideals and Western thinking, and that it is not applicable to the oppressed, I think he would be critical of the UN, especially in this context. I know something Sartre wrote in his introduction. I'm going to read it. It's linked to what you are saying. So Sartre was a good friend. Jean-Paul Sartre is a philosopher, French philosopher, who was an anti-colonial, and he was friends with Fanon, where he was...
Friend of Israel.
Also, yeah. Yes, thank you, yeah. Good to say, definitely. So it's like Camus, who was okay with colonization of Algeria, but you should treat the people who are colonized in a better way. Yeah, but it's okay to have Algeria as a colony. So that's literally indeed. And coming back to...
so did you just say that it was okay for him to have Algeria as a colony?
Yeah.
That was his ideology.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's the problem I have with Camus.
Yeah, me too.
Should I? Yeah. In the beginning? Sorry.
They accepted.
Yeah.
Feel the aggression,
yeah.
etc.
So don't.
In the beginning,
as the colony usually does, right? Open
yes,
arms, welcome.
They were open. They want to
work
together. There was openness, and there were no problems. But then they start to dominate everything, to take the water away, the best land, to suppress people, and then the resistance starts.
Yeah. So, colonization for Camus was no problem, and then we hear Sartre had no issue with Israel also. So Sartre was the partner of Simone de Beauvoir. He's also a philosopher who said, you are not born a woman, you are made a woman, but that is something else. I'm going to read, thank you, I'm going to read what Sartre says in the introduction. It's a small part. In relation to your question about the UN, Sartre says, let me see. Okay, let me see where to start. Okay. Is it enough that they show us what we have made of them for us to realize we have made of ourselves? But is it any use? Yes, for Europe is at death's door. But you will say we live in the mother country and we disapprove of her excesses. Is it true you are not settlers, but you are no better? For the pioneers belong to you. You sent them overseas, and it was you they enriched. You warned them that if they shed too much blood, you would disown them. Or say you did, in something of the same way as any state maintains abroad a mob of agitators, agents, provocateurs, and spies whom it disowns when they are caught. And then it comes, then he says, you who are so liberal and so humane, who have such an exaggerated adoration of culture that it verges on affectation. You pretend to forget that you own colonies and that in them men are massacred in your name. I think in the spirit of Fanon, what Sartre writes, that would be a way of critique regarding the UN. Okay, who was next? You were first and then I will come to you. Did you not forget? You still remember? Okay, sorry, here you go. I'm sorry that I am, can I just do this? Yeah, thanks.
So first it relates to how, when you started the Q&A, you mentioned about, according to Fanon, Hamas would be a resistance, how do you say, like a liberation front or a resistance?
That was an answer to a question.
Yeah.
I asked what would, in the light of what Fanon says in The Wretched of the Earth, what we have seen and what we have heard today, what would you think about what is happening there?
Yeah, and then it was followed as well, or like later there was this question about like Dutch scholars and academics and what they do, and I'm struggling with sometimes placing an importance or a responsibility on, let's say, academia or proficient intellectuals and writers to validate something that is experienced on the common level of people themselves relaying their stories and saying this is what we are going through in the most simplest terms of human experience. But then we do need scholars and international laws to tell us that actually this is called a humanitarian crime and that is not, and so on and so forth. So, and regarding to still holding on like expectancy or like an accountability to scholars and academics who have not spoken out or did not follow through on their careers built on decolonial theories and practice, and are not following through on an action level and supporting street level in real time when calls for like anti-colonial, decolonial actions are called for and motions. I'm struggling. Do I still hold those, to a certain extent, yes, like those parties accountable and like push them towards a practical, consequential action to hold them for it now? And this applies both to scholars but also to any authoritative figure, really, such as like international organizations and its agencies, as the UN and its agencies. Hold them accountable for an aim for reform, or delegitimize as they are illegitimate as they are, كمان as a way of like toppling down the system bottom up. But also because you mentioned about like the West and institutions from the West, I want to find as well a nuance within me where it's not just a big umbrella of like the West is never, it's just like it will never apply to us because we are so like whoa in another, yani no, they have tried towards some things. These are like projects where they have tried with the United Nations, But the problem is on what basis have those been set up, and what kind of mentality and agenda do they still try to protect and proliferate? Yani, I don't want to say, no, there's nothing called humanitarian law, this is bullshit. I want to say this is skewed because it is based on this and this and that, and it's unthinkable that you would give 5 countries with weapons of mass destruction and a very bloody CV, the veto rights. Yani, you know, and no, so that's the same, like as scholars and academics, as international organizations, this idea of like reform or dismantling.
Yeah, I think it's a good analysis, and you touch upon different contexts, because I think the academia context can differ from the international law context. So it really depends on on where are you what are you looking at. Regarding to academia, I think the issue a lot of students and people have is that we talk a lot about the freedom of speech and also the freedom of thought at the universities. But then you have this group now who wanted to do a sit-in at the university. So you could say, okay, that's also freedom of speech, freedom of thought. And then it was said, no, we are not going to do this here. So you can question within that context, what does freedom of thought and freedom of speech mean within the university context? I'm not even talking about academia generally with different scholars writing about decolonization, etc. So regarding to international law, that's also a very different context from the academic context, where you already have, like, what is her name? Albanese. She's Francesca Albanese, who is I think, I don't know if you say lawyer or jurist, specialized in international law. Who? Let me come to you. Hold. Stop. Yes, now. Here we go.
She's the special rapporteur for the Palestinian occupied territories, and she also gave a lecture at Leiden University for the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Human Rights.
Yeah.
She was really good,
in
my opinion.
Yeah. So if you want to know what she said, and this is something a lot of people also have an issue with. She said, first of all, under international law, the Palestinians are occupied. Yeah? So under international law, the occupying force, meaning Israel, does not have a right to defend itself because it has control over its occupying territories. So you do not have two countries on the same level who are fighting each other. There is no level relationship there. So, and she said many things. I definitely have not told you everything that she said, and she is the specialist regarding to this. I am not specialized regarding to this. So I'm just saying what I saw that she was conveying. So it's very important to, when you, like what you said about different spaces, different contexts, that you have to go about it in a manner that is applicable to that context. You can't throw everything on one heap, but how to fix it, how to, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. I can just look at it and try to analyze, and from Fanon certain aspects, but I think there is a responsibility that everyone has, each one here, but also where you are seated and what kind of organization that you are in.
You also spoke that you advise schools on decolonial discourse.
Yeah.
Can you speak something about it, what you're facing this period on your job?
I am facing also people afraid to speak out because there is a real threat to their job. So not everybody is privileged enough to be able to speak about this issue without it having consequences. And we have seen that it has consequences, especially if you have a certain ethnic or religious background, meaning brown person, or if you have a Muslim background, you have to watch yourself, what you are saying. So this is what I'm being told by teachers that say, I want to talk about this, I want to speak out, but it is not possible for me because there is a risk. So they do try to talk about it with their students. And how you talk about it, well, that depends on how you go about it. What information are you going to use? And we here in the Netherlands have something called the burgerschapsvak. And within that course you have, or it's not a course, but it's something that is implemented in schools. They have to implement it. There is a theme in it called War and Peace. And you can use that as a teacher to try. Huh?
In middle school and high school?
No, in the primary, secondary school.
Oh.
Ja. High school is, er zit geen burgerschap op de hogeschool.
Like
No,
age 10.
No, age 16 to 18.
Yeah, 16. Okay. I'll just, I saw you and, no, you already asked. Were you first or were you first? I forgot. Let me see. Yeah. I will come to you. I will come to you. I will give you the microphone first, yeah?
Another question on your remark about you reading out the introduction of Sartre. Because the late widow of Fanon, Josie, tried to get rid of the introduction.
Yeah.
Maspero didn't want it, even like the Penguin and the Dutch publishing house, because Sartre is famous and good selling.
Yeah.
They were opposed the foreword of Sartre. So
okay, I didn't know that.
Officials tried to, with legal ways, to get rid of the introduction.
Okay.
But
because
the role of Sartre, you know it.
Yeah.
Absolute pro-Israel.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just... Yeah. So, I didn't know that they tried to get the introduction of Sartre out.
So you have an old book, old version.
Huh?
You have the uncensored.
I have the uncensored version because it's a very old book. And again, like I said in the beginning, Sartre does not understand Fanon very good regarding to certain aspects. Yeah, I don't know if I can say period, but I know that he writes in a way that when I was reading it, I'm like, oh, okay, no. And there is critique about that. So thank you for sharing that with us. Shall I go to you? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, here you go.
So, I'm not old, I'm still young. But the older I get, the more I understand that to decolonize, you have to sacrifice. So, either lives, blood, jobs, career, reputation, whatever that means. You have to sacrifice to liberate, because the oppression is violence, and you have to get out of the violence, and you can't get out of the violence that is inhumane with human tools, so to say. But I wonder how Fanon thinks about it. Like, is violence the only way for decolonization? Because when we think about it, when you think about Haiti, about the Afro-Americans, South Africa, Vietnam, Algeria, the Rif, Palestine, Indonesia, it was all a violent struggle. So it's logic to think that violence is the only way. What does Frans Fanon say about that?
Good question. Because Fanon says colonization is inherently violence, and it begets violence. So you cannot start off colonizing a country and then eventually there will be no violence anymore, because it already started off as violence and it has an impact on the oppressed and the oppressors. So would he say it's the only solution? Preferably not. But if it is the case that through the ideology of Fanon, you are an oppressed person within a colonial context, then violence is a way to free yourself, because it's a way of defending yourself, but it's also catharsis, because you have been reduced by the colonizer to being insignificant, and to take that back, to take back your agency, to take back your power, you can use violence, and it is something that is physical but also has a mental impact. So is it the only thing? No, but within the context of colonialism...
Yeah, within the context of colonialism.
because he literally says colonialism is inherently violent, and it begets violence, it puts violence in the minds and in the houses of the oppressed. It is something that will inevitably happen. But if you can do it without violence, because he also states that violence has its cost, it has its human cost, not only bodies, but also the effect it has in a negative way, not only mentally, but also physically and more. So he does warn regarding to that. But I cannot see any other way that Fanon would explain it, because when he already starts from the premise that colonialism inherently is violence, and I have seen many freedom fighters state that, if you look at Kwame Ture or Douglas Adams, or what is his name, who says that power concedes nothing. You know, you can't ask for your freedom, like Assata Shakur also said, you know. So preferably no violence.
But it's ideally.
But if you are in a state of oppression and you have to use it, then that is the case. That is the context where you are in.
But isn't it also because there is no freedom of speech for the press?
You said, is it also because there is no freedom of speech in the West?
Because there's no freedom of speech for the oppressed or the people who support the oppressed. Because
Yeah.
we see that right now.
Yeah.
Shadow ban.
I'm not saying in this context, I'm not saying go out and be violent. Disclaimer, not saying that. We're talking within a context of colonialism. We are not in a colonized country. Well, not literally. I mean, you can...
No, but like, not
Let me give one example, and I'll get to you. When the Netherlands was under the German occupation, yeah? We were occupied by Nazi Germany. You had people who, in the beginning, tried to protest in a peaceful manner. For example, they are called the Februari-staking, the February strike of workers. They got killed by the occupying force. They got shot, they got killed. Then, after that, you had violent resistance. You have even stories about women seducing German soldiers, getting them into a forest, and then killing them. That's using gender and violence as a resistance. So, if it starts peacefully, it is possible to start peacefully. But if that doesn't work, then yes, you get to a point that you have only violence to use. Regarding to Palestine, it is not that there were no peaceful protests. There have been peaceful protests by the Palestinians. They have been shot and they have been killed. Yeah? So you see the context, what Fanon is talking about, and the relationship regarding to oppression and being oppressed. There is this analysis that you can use over and over again in different situations. Because he talks about Africa, but you can also analyze different situations where you have oppression and the oppressed. So, good question. I saw somebody, yeah, who was it? Was it over here? No? Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. It's okay.
I have a question that I don't really have an answer to myself, but I'm wondering from Fanon's perspective. He does explain that the oppression leads to violence in most of the cases, at least. But from his perspective, again, when does the violence end?
Yeah, that's a good question. The violence ends when the people are free. When the when the oppressed are not being oppressed anymore. As you see at the end of the movie, the Battle of Algiers, the French colonizer asks, "What do you want?" And then they get a reaction, "Istiqlal, we want to be free, we want to be free," and they said more things. Then the violence ends, I think, but from the Fanon perspective. I don't think it literally ends at that point, because of course there is more going on, but I think from Fanon's perspective, because the colonial violence ends, the decolonizing resistance has its purpose is fulfilled. But then, and then I saw hands, and I will get.
Fanon would be saying this. Would it ever be possible for violence to end in Palestine?
In Palestine, would it be possible to end violence in Palestine? There are many answers regarding to that. I don't know what the right answer would be. I have a personal answer, but that is personal, but I cannot give you an answer regarding to that.
I hoped Fanon would, but apparently
yeah. Fanon would say when the oppression ends, then, yeah, there's a much better future. But the question is if that is the case. Yeah, I think then people have a chance to rebuild or build or really live, have their own agency. I think all these aspects do play a role in that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I was standing on your feet.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Concerning the nation state.
Yeah.
Does Fanon also write something about the nation state and that being a form of oppression too? Because we are asking for liberation, but I think in the end the nation state itself is also cannot never be really inclusive, and it's always also a form of oppression.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah. I think that's a good question, which I do not have the answer, to be honest. Because I do understand what he thinks about an external force coming in, oppressing the natives, and trying to take over the country, settler colonialism. But is a nation state a settler colonial state? That's a different question, yeah. Like the Netherlands is a nation state, but yeah, would it? I don't think so. But I don't have a real answer to that.
No, because I think in general the concept of a nation state is a European and imperialist concept. Yeah. So
interesting.
That's the biggest, I think, the biggest inheritance of colonialism. That this whole world is divided by nation states now.
Yeah. I think when you talk about the nation state, the United States of America, yeah, because that started as a settler colonialist country. Some say it still is. You can have different perspectives depending on who you are. But is the Netherlands? It's not a settler state. You know, it's a nation state. But what did you say?
Like, how did the land originate?
Yeah, did they drive out natives that were in the Netherlands? No, because the Dutch.
But also the question, like, how do you mentally belong to a nation state? I think the nation state set norms in which people have to fit into that norm, and if you don't fit into that norm, then is a form of oppression often.
Yeah, but it's different from the violence that Fanon is talking about, because he really is talking about the colonial context. And the nation state is not the same one-to-one as a colonial context or colonial state. There is a difference there. Even though I understand what you're saying, but I don't think Fanon would say, like, if you have a nation state in Africa, where the 1888 scramble for Africa was happening when they divided up and cut up Africa, the continent, like a cake, you know, every colonial power took a piece, then if you would argue, I will come to you, if you would argue that that nation state that was created, that is from the framework of Fanon, then I would be inclined to say yes. But regarding to the context that we are in, it's very hard to say that Fanon would say, yes, that is indeed exactly the same, because it is not. It is not settler colonialism. Yeah, I'll come to you.
Yes, the concept of a nation state is not settler colonialism, but it is an artificial way of dividing people. And when you look at it from a global perspective, there is a global hierarchy because of nation states.
Mm-hmm.
So there are nation states that are higher on the hierarchy, quote unquote. And in that way, the concept of a nation state, it's still supremacist, because it's not about equality, it's still about dividing territory to decide who has more power.
Yeah.
And even like the borders that we know, it's actually apartheid, in my opinion.
Okay.
Like the passports, visa, all those things, it's all global apartheid. I think that's also kind of, I mean, more than that, but
I can.
Also what I mean.
Yeah. Within the Fanonian ideology, like apartheid plays a role, but it's still within a colonial context. Although I understand what you are saying, you are talking about power dynamics, about hierarchy. These themes are also within Fanon's ideology, but he does not literally connect it to just it being a country, a nation state, as far as I know. The colonial context is very important here. And then I'll come to you.
What I understand also from that is, you know, when we say, like, or when you explained, such colonial force is so violent that it necessitates violence as a resistance. And masalan here, when we say, okay, there's a banning on like wearing a kufi, and that is also oppression, and you are within like that country, and then, you know, like that is also like limiting your freedom of expression and such. So then also it requires then violence in return. The problem is, it's really, I know they're both suppressive, but it cannot be all equated as like the colonial violence. And just as much as we can try to imagine and know they are risking my life and my job, or it's really that much different to be under a colonial violence generationally, on a daily, in every craft of the life detail.
It's a way of looking at it, and that's also okay. Okay, I'll let you discuss between you two, because for me, I'm taking the context of the wretched of the earth, and that is really, So I understand that you look at it from a different perspective, and that is also okay. Yeah, I'll just go to the gentleman at the back. Yes, here you go.
I wanted to add that.
Let me stand here.
So you were talking about the nation state, but like the European nation states, they developed as nation state within the context of imperium.
Yeah.
So there's not that divide. The Netherlands became the Netherlands while conquering Piet Hein and the treasure from that Spain stole from the south of America. Spain became Spain because of the treasures they robbed from the south of America. The Netherlands became the Netherlands in the context of imperium. France became France in that same context. So there's not that divide. And this is very interesting. So I forgot how Fanon writes about it, but there's a British sociologist called Gurminder Bambra, and she points that in sociology, like Marx and Durkheim and Weber, and no one mentions the colonies. And she said this is a blind spot when they talk about modernization theory. The colonies are left out, and she writes really good books about that, and I wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, big round of applause. That was a great answer. And don't forget that Fanon also states that the creation of a colonizing force, when they start out with bayonets and cannons, and that is not something that happened in the formation of the Netherlands, etc., like the gentleman said. Thank you. Yeah, you are the.
You are
the last one. Yeah.
Just a curiosity question.
Yeah.
Did Fanon ever wrote anything about accountability afterwards, after the freedom, what we say, Is there any accountability parts that he touched upon?
Yeah. That's a good question, which I don't have the answer right now, but I know he wrote about when the oppressed are free, then they have their agency to fulfill their own destiny, but the accountability from the colonizer would be reparations, but not the creation or any kind of help regarding to the colonized fulfilling their lived reality, because eventually you are asking the people that were oppressing you to shape your reality, and that is very problematic because they have been oppressing you. So the reparation must happen, but not, but in a certain way. That is what he states.
Right. Sorry to add.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to say, in a way that there is agency for those that have freed of themselves of oppression.
Right. Totally agree on that side. I was wondering more as well if you look at Germany, for example, the Nazi era, how afterwards, throughout the schooling system, you can see a clear taken of responsibility from their side to teach their kids how it went about and what actually happened. But if I flip the coin into, like, for example, slavery period, how that's not being taught into schools, for example, here in the European countries, while still being taught in the colonies as that being their identity in a way. So more on that side of accountability, of taking the responsibility of knowing that you did wrong and teaching your kids that you did wrong.
He does, Fanon does write about the responsibility the old colonizers have to reckon with their past and to reckon with what they have brought about by colonizing others and how it changed themselves. He writes about that. And I think we have too much of a romanticized teaching about our colonial and slavery past, and when I talk about the Dutch context. And we just started to make amends with this history, and we are definitely not there yet. There's a lot to learn and a lot to win regarding to that. So good point you made there. Okay, I think I have to ask you to make, okay. Is it, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think she was first. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure.
And then I will come to you, yeah?
I want to go on what she said about...
Can you talk in the mic? Yeah.
About that decolonization is sacrifice, because I was involved with SGP, so I knew about how they basically censored, the event that they wanted to do about Palestine. But even before that, there was a lot of censorship. They didn't want to give us room, etc., etc. But a lot of times, especially now, when I look, like a majority is with us. When you look at people, when you look at students, when you look, for example, at the United States, when polls are showing that a majority of Democrats and even Republicans are actually for a ceasefire, yet it's not translating or something. So for me, I feel like, but even if in democracy, even if a majority is actually for a ceasefire and different policies, like they don't really listen. So I feel like, how can we here fight against colonialism and do the work basically? So what would you say about that?
Well, I would say about that depends on the people that are being colonized and oppressed. There you have to listen to a person from that group of people. Like if we talk about a country where there is colonization taking place, you have to let people who are being colonized, who are part of that group, you have to listen to them. So recently I went to this meeting with the BDS creator Omar Barouti, who is Palestinian himself. Yeah, he had certain ideas to share regarding to how to go about it, how to resist, what we can do, So then it's time to sit down and listen to the people who are enduring, who are colonized.
One comment on that.
Yeah, and then I'll get to you, and then we have to...
One comment on that, because I know that it's
quite controversial to which Palestinian voices we should listen. Because I know Ahmad Barghouti, and I agree completely with him, and I think we should follow what he's saying. But there are also Palestinian voices that are saying the opposite of what he's saying. So how do we navigate that, that division?
Yeah, thank you. The good point. I just mentioned him as an example. I'm not saying we should listen to one person. I said we have to listen to people from that are being colonized, from that group of people. So yeah, definitely listen to as many people as you want to from the specific group of people. For me, I follow certain accounts on social media of people who are within Gaza. Very brave people who are journalists, and they convey what is happening, and they also tell you what they expect from you, how you can support, and what you can do. So definitely listen to as many voices. But I just gave one example because I was there. But yeah, you're right. Okay, the last question or contribution.
Question.
Yeah.
Thank you. You kind of touched upon this a little bit. I was wondering, does he talk a little bit about the role of external pressure from outside the occupying power and how important that is, whether it's through the form of BDS, what's happening with Yemen, 16-year-olds on TikTok, social media, all of that. Like, how important is that when it comes to this concept?
Yeah, well, he talks about the individual, but also the collective, and the collective meaning not only individuals within a country that is being colonized, because a collective is not only, individuals like within the Algerian context. If there are other people who are solidaire with them, for Fanon, that's also great because they become part of the resistance collective. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yes, should we? I'm gonna go down. Yeah. Let me just get over here in the light. So, thank you very much for your patience. It's like 9:36, so I'm 6 minutes over my time. I would really like to thank you for being here, for your questions, for your contributions, for your criticism. It's also very welcome. And I would like to thank Ibrahim and Jake again. And big round of applause also for them. Without them, it would not be possible. Jake is in the corner over there. Thank you, Jake. And Ibrahim, of course, and Theater Ventilator. I'm not sure if I said it right. Also for hosting us. There is a possibility for you to get some drinks, get some Palestinian food, and every cent goes to Medical Aid Palestine. So I want to thank you for just, being here, listening to me. And I hope we can talk further and you have a great evening. And as one of our visitors said, long live the revolution. Thank you.